So I'm Shannon Anderson, and my job title now is children's book author and speaker. And I've been doing that more seriously in the last 10 years, I would say. And I just left teaching. So I've been an elementary teacher for the last 25 years. But during the last 10 years of that time, I started writing more and getting some things published, and just recently resigned from teaching to focus on writing and speaking full time. It could kind of be answered both ways, because yes, I do work for myself, but at the same time, when I'm writing a book and have a contract with a publishing company, they're kind of my boss. So I work with multiple publishers. So I guess you could say I work with multiple companies. So, one company, Free Spirit Publishing, I've already done 4 books with them, and I have another book coming out. Yay, you failed, a growth mindset book. And so Free Spirit Publishing is one of the companies that I work with. And so sometimes that means, that I'm working with them to create a book, or sometimes it is helping them by providing blog posts or some marketing or speaking at different places. So I am self-employed technically, but I work with others as an author. It's very different day to day. Some people think that as writers, if you're a full-time author, that you're sitting around in your pajamas and a notepad, or you have your laptop and you're just getting to write or type all day long, inspiration hits you. But it really isn't that way at all. As a matter of fact, I don't necessarily write every single day. And sometimes my writing looks like, well, for example, yesterday I was filling out marketing information for a publisher. Sometimes it looks like a critique meeting with some other authors where we have exchanged our stories with each other, and we get together on Zoom for a couple of hours from all over the country. There are 7 of us, and our writing work is helping each other improve our writing. And so it looks very different every day. And it really depends on if I'm on a deadline, that I might be doing a lot of writing, or I might be doing research for that writing. So it just depends. The nice thing now that I'm not also teaching full time is that I have more flexibility in my day. So if I'm getting, it's a lot of mental work. And so sometimes you just need to step away for a minute, and I might need to just take my dog for a walk for 10 minutes and come back. And that's part of my work. It's an enjoyable part of my work, but it is part of the creative process, is making sure that you're continuing to restore your creativity and take breaks, all of those types of things. So yeah, it looks really different. I actually teach this whole class on unlocking your maker mindset, and it's all about like how to maximize your time and energy in your day when you are a solo entrepreneur. And so it's all about that night before, making that today's to-do list. And sometimes I'll have a few things down on my need to do, and if I am able to check those off, then I'll have some other things on my want to do list. But the reality is, just like if I were still teaching, I have other responsibilities like managing my household. I still do laundry during the day while I'm working on a story. And so that's kind of the beauty of it too, though, is having that freedom. And if I go for a morning run and I come home full of ideas, and that's where a lot of my ideas hit me, then when I get home, like this morning, it happened. As soon as I got home from running, instead of stretching and taking a shower, I was immediately on my laptop and typing as fast as I could everything that had come to me as an idea. So it isn't really a cookie cutter mold, and there isn't a blueprint for it. It's what you plan to bring to the day, I guess. Yeah, I don't think there is any required, because there isn't something where, when you're writing a cover letter and submitting a story, or your agent is doing that on your behalf, it's not something where, it's very rare that they're going to ask for your resume or your educational experience. It might be like a little tiny part of one paragraph that you mention experience that is relevant to the story that you're submitting, but there isn't anything that says you have to have an MFA in creative writing, or that you have to have gone to, the school Vermont, you know, that everyone goes to that is a published author. That's not the case. It's not a thing like that. As a matter of fact, I don't have a degree in writing. My degree, I have a master's degree in education, and that's because my path was to be a teacher. Now, in all fairness, as a senior in high school, in my scrapbook I wrote that I was going to be a teacher and also a children's book author. So I did have that foresight. I wanted to do it. I just didn't get to it till much later. But but aside from one class I took in college in creative writing, because I had, you know, this extra little space in my schedule, I didn't have any formal training in that. But the thing is, a lot of people that are going into writing, um, I can only speak from children's writing because that's what I mostly do. But a lot of it is finding online classes you can take, going to conferences. There's a huge children's book writing conference in Los Angeles every summer and in New York every winter. I've gone to both of those many times because I'm learning from the people that are doing it and are a little further down the path than I am. And so that's one of my biggest pieces of advice, is to find someone that is doing something and they're doing it well. And, you know, if you're able, ask them questions about that, or research them in some way, go to their websites, find out what they're doing, where are they learning, who are they learning from, because you don't have to have, you know, a specific degree in writing to become a published author. There are plenty of people who, you know, left high school and just had that passion and drive to write and started writing right away. Now, I would think that they probably have gone to some conferences and have taken in some workshops and things, because it's really difficult to know the business side of that and how to submit all of those types of things. So you have to still know what's going on, but you don't have to have a bachelor's or a master's degree in writing to get published. Well, when I was in high school, so I mentioned, you know, when I was a senior, I kind of knew I wanted to do this as well as teaching. But when I was in high school, my high school job was working in a library. And at the time, our library was a two-story building, and the upstairs was all of the adult section, and the downstairs, the entire downstairs was the children's area. And so my job, fortunately, was taking over for the children's librarian when she left at 4 o'clock each day. I would come in after school, and from 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock when the library closed, I was essentially the children's librarian. And so parents would come and they would go upstairs to look around at the books they wanted to look at, and they would send their kids downstairs. And I, you know, loved kids, obviously, because I had the goal to be an elementary teacher, but I loved getting to match kids with a book that I thought they would enjoy. Sometimes the parents were upstairs for a long time, so sometimes I would just sit and read with them. And, you know, I loved even the job of processing the new books, you know, like getting everything into the system and being the first one to get to read that book before it goes out and, you know, into people getting to check it out. And so I just kind of fell in love all over again with children's books by doing that job. And as a kid, I was one of those that I loved. Like, I have pictures of me sitting on my grandma's lap and having her read me the Little Golden books. I had a whole shelf of Little Golden books, and I loved reading stories. And it wasn't until high school that I realized, gosh, I still love these stories. And how cool would it be when I'm an elementary teacher to also get to provide some of these stories? So that was kind of the seed that was planted way, way back. And then I decided when I was, well, like I said, about 10 years ago, I, you know, as many moms, I felt guilty, like going after some dream and spending money on that when I know my own kids need to go through college and I need to pay for that. And, you know, there are the living expenses and all of those things that I wasn't going to be able to just take off and start going to LA and New York and learning all these things, taking classes, buying a laptop. But I found out about this creative teacher creativity fellowship, and I wrote a grant and just took a chance on getting it, and I ended up getting it, and that was in 2010. And at the time, that grant was $8,000, and it was to pursue a creative passion, and this was only available for teachers, and it didn't have to be something related to what you were teaching. And so I wrote the grant to pursue writing for kids, to learn how to do it. And so I bought my first laptop computer Now, this is in 2010. So it's only 11 years ago, and I now have 14 published books. So I just want people to realize that, if you're very focused and you're serious about something, it can happen in a shorter amount of time than you may think. But that was what sent me to my very first Los Angeles conference. That was what got me on my way to taking classes online and going to other workshops and learning everything I needed to learn. And then once I knew how to do it, then I couldn't wait to try to get a book published. And so my very first book was about my youngest daughter, Maddie, who had amblyopia, which is lazy eye. And she had to wear an eye patch for 3 years. And she was not excited about that, not happy about that, didn't want to do it. And so I called the book, I Am Not a Pirate. And that was the first book that I ever published. But I also got to see through the process of publishing, like how powerful writing can be, because it's not just about sharing a story, but it's the ripple effects of sharing that story, especially if it's something that's near and dear to your heart. So I was able to help other kids and to see how Maddie got through it with a sense of humor. And August is Amblyopia Awareness Month, and I was able to send copies of the book to people all over the world. When I found these parents on Facebook groups of kids with eye issues, I was able to help all of these kids, and it was all through the power of writing. Well, then from there, I discovered, okay, now that I have a book, I'm technically a published author. So I can start doing author visits like on my fall breaks and spring breaks when I'm not teaching. And then that was a whole nother layer that I was like, wow, I love this. Like, this is still teaching, but this is teaching in a new way and inspiring young readers and writers and seeing the power of writing. And I was hooked. Like, after that first book came out and I started getting to speak about it, I was like, okay, what else can I write? What other messages can I try to spread? And then it just kind of kept going from there. I guess I work with a lot of people if you consider all of the readers of my books. So, in that way, I'm trying to intentionally interact with my readers as much as possible. And some of that is through author visits, which are one of my favorite things to do as an author. And some of that is just through the marketing and social media and ways that I'm able to connect with readers. I do some online book studies with some of my books with little readers. I'm parts of different platforms that kids can have an in-person Zoom call with an author. So things like that, where I am working with lots of different kids and readers, teachers and librarians through the author visits. But as far as like having a boss, it kind of goes back to the publishers, the people within the publishing companies I'm interacting with, but not as often. It's just like, when this, like, just the other day, I received an email that had the cover design of one of my upcoming books. And so I was interacting with the editor for that project. And so we emailed back and forth a few times, but for the most part, it's me and all of my critters in my house. My daughter, is away at school. My husband is at work, and it's just me and all of my pets and my ideas. And so in that way, it is a little bit of a lonely profession. But when I get to do the author visits or speak at a conference and things like that, I feel like I have even more energy to give, because it's so exciting to be around other people and to get to share some of the things, because I do spend a lot of quiet time creating. So then I guess all of that builds, and I hope people can feel the excitement that I have when I get to share that with others. Oh, for sure. I mean, being an elementary teacher, I taught first grade for 16 years. And then I was actually a writing coach and got to work with kids K through 5. And I was the gifted coordinator. So I was going into classrooms K through 5 and doing lessons, modeling, writing lessons for teachers, those kinds of things. And then I was teaching third grade the last 5 years. And so in those different areas, I was immersed in my market. Like, those are my readers. Like, picture books are, kindergarten, first, second grade, basically. And some of my middle grade books and chapter books are third grade. So something that was nice is having instant beta readers. If I was working on a project, I could read it to my students and they would give me very honest feedback, and it was very helpful. And, it's like having a built-in critique group. But they have definitely a different viewpoint than the adults in my critique group, because they're taking it from a different angle. But these are kids that, I'm able to see, are they laughing in the right spots, or do they understand this really? If you use an idiom that maybe someone hasn't heard of before and you just get the blank stare, you're like, okay, I need to change that. But not only having, that information and feedback, but then getting to know kids and getting to know their likes, getting to know what they need to know, like what do they need to be learning. And so I think that's why so many of my books are on social and emotional topics, because as I have seen needs in my classroom, like, Penelope Perfect, I wrote about a student in my classroom, and she wasn't named Penelope. I changed the name, but it was a student who was really hard on herself, like in tears if she missed one spelling word, those kinds of things. And Too Shy to Say Hi is a book that I wrote about a really shy student I had that was so shy that she missed a lot of opportunities because she let that fear get in her way. All the growth mindset research and books that I've written, on believing in yourself and learning from those mistakes, I feel are so important for kids to know. And because I've taught it in the classroom, I'm able to, I feel like, convey it better through my books. But also, as part of, the services that I provide, is I do professional development for teachers. So for example, there's a school I'm going to soon that I'm doing an author visit in the gym for all the kids. But then the other half of the day, I'm doing professional development for the teachers. So I'm providing ideas for social and emotional learning lessons that they can do in their classrooms, and also ideas for how to make writing exciting during their writing block time in their classroom. So because of my teaching experience, I'm able to share not just my books, but I'm able to share, like how to extend beyond those books, how to launch those conversations that maybe we need to be having in the classroom. So for sure, all of the experience that I've had has shaped me as a children's book author. I think a children's book author needs to have, first of all, a lot of growth mindset and resilience. So I've had to learn how to get a little bit thicker skin, because there is a lot of rejection that happens in the publishing industry. So not only when you're sending off a story to a publishing house and they say no thank you, or worse, you don't hear back from them at all, or you get the form letter rejection, which is almost worse. Or when you're trying to get an agent, same thing. There are, I can't even quote the statistics, but there are a lot of people submitting their stories and saying, do you want to make this into a book? A lot of people trying to get an agent that will help them submit their books, and they only have a limited list. Some publishers might publish 5 or 6 titles a year. And even the bigger ones, they have small imprints that make up their big publishing house. And the book that you have might only fit in 1 or 2 of those imprints. And of those 1 or 2 imprints, there might be thousands of people trying to get one of those 10 spots. And so it's really difficult. And so I would say that is one thing, is to be resilient and to understand that it doesn't mean your story is garbage. It can mean that, that editor, maybe they just had a story similar to that submitted that is going to become a book, and they wouldn't want 2 titles competing against each other in the same imprint. Maybe it is the taste of the editor. It's truly, a human that is reading this, and they're deciding, if that's something that they feel is good for the market, but it also is a reflection of their personality too. Sometimes it just doesn't jive with them. It doesn't, resonate with them in a way that they would be the one to carry that book through and make it its best if they don't really resonate with it very well. It could be that you don't follow the submission guidelines correctly. I mean, there are so many things. I mean, I've even had people say, it depends on the editor that it lands with, and the mood they're in that day, and how much time they have, and so many different factors. I would say another one is probably trying to be resourceful, because even in stories that are fiction, you still have to do a fair amount of research and figure out, like how would someone behave if they're this way? Or, when I was writing about the biography of Benjamin Franklin, I had to do a lot of research. And right now I'm working on a book on Valentine's Day and how different countries around the world celebrate it. Well, I could tell you about America and that's about it. And so I had to research all of these different countries and find out how do they celebrate it. So there's a lot of research. So you have to be resourceful, researching agents and who represents picture books, or is it only young adult, or do they only represent authors that also illustrate, those kinds of things. So you're constantly having to learn and research and be resourceful. And then I would say the other thing that's really important for being a children's book author is creativity. And to me, creativity is looking at things in new ways, but it's also being a problem solver. And so figuring out, what is it that either kids need or kids would enjoy? We teach in school, the author's purpose is one of our standards, and is it to persuade someone? Is it to educate on something, to inform? Is it just to entertain someone? And so you have to figure out like what kind of book is it you want to write, and what do you have to offer through that story. So I would say those are the big ones, like growth mindset and resourcefulness and creativity. A laptop is recommended. And over the past year, since most of my speaking has turned into virtual because of COVID and everything else, I have invested in other things. So for example, I have here a little document camera. So when I need to share something, I can. I have this big old ring light so that I have good lighting. I have like this platform that holds my computer at the right height. So, there are just little things like that that have to do more with the speaking side of what I do. But as far as just writing in itself, I would say the computer is your best friend. You're going to be using that a lot. And many times a story for me will start on paper. And then once I feel a little better about it, then I'll actually commit to typing it up and saving it. I have a file on my computer that are books in progress. And some of them might be a sentence, and some of them might be a full-fledged story that I've fleshed out. And some of them might just be jotting down a few ideas, like a little kernel of an idea that I want to develop eventually, and just saving that so I don't forget about it. So yeah, I would say the computer is the biggest thing. And beyond that, it's just, all of the resources you need to gather and the knowledge that you need to put together the book. I travel to workshops and conferences to not only get to learn more things, but also to present. So, I kind of believe in Maya Angelou's quote, when you get, give, and when you learn, teach. I've just always kind of had that in me. So anytime, I learn something, I can't wait to figure out a way to translate that into learning for someone else. So that's why I mentor a lot of authors. I do critiques for authors, things like that. But you definitely wouldn't have to travel. So a lot of the work I've done in the past year was completely virtual. And a lot of the conferences have converted that way, whether they're completely virtual or hybrid, that you have that option, or that you can watch a recording later, things like that. So as far as learning, you wouldn't have to travel. And as far as presenting, well, recently you wouldn't have to travel. I can't say in the future if that's going to happen. Some of the keynotes that I'm doing over the next few months are actually in person. And so I have to travel all the way to Salt Lake City, Utah for the American Library Association conference, the School Librarian Conference. And so that's 21 hours away for me. And I'm keynoting for the North Carolina Gifted Conference. So that's, I'm going to have to fly to that. I'm presenting for the Mississippi Gifted Conference, so I'll have to go to that. So there are some things that are in person that, if I was against traveling, I wouldn't have the opportunity to do it because they're only offering in person at this point in time anyway. But I do enjoy that. So for me, it's a completely different energy if I'm in the room with a group of teachers or a group of readers than if I'm on the computer screen. And, things have improved virtually. Like you can do so many things with sharing your screen, and I have props galore that I share, but being present with the people there is, to me, just so much more powerful and engaging. So I enjoy the travel part, and I'm looking forward to that and hoping that that is going to be happening more. So I've done both, and I actually have a couple of books out for adults as well. Um, and so for me, picture books is something I love, love, love. And I think part of that is just, and I'm not the illustrator, I wish I was, but I just love them. I mean, when I was teaching, I love doing a read aloud and being able to show the pictures. And it's just such a part of the story. I mean, a picture book is 50% text and 50% pictures telling the story. So for, I guess, those purposes, I like the younger audience because I think part of it is when I started teaching, it was first grade, and I just have always had a heart for the primary grades. But the other thing is when I've done things for the older grades, like when I wrote Mindset Power, this is a chapter book all about growth mindset, and I'm able to do more with the older kids. So I have done online book studies with this where kids have joined me from England and Mexico and all over, and I meet with them once a week for the 8 weeks of the 8 chapters, and we're able to dive in and talk about, neuroplasticity and resilience and things like that I wouldn't necessarily be able to talk at that level with the younger kids. So, for the younger ones, Y is for Yet is an alphabet book on growth mindset. So I can relate to them with that. But the older ones, I'm able to go into a little bit more depth. And so that can be exciting. And they have a lot more to share, I feel like. And they can do a lot more as far as when I offer online writing classes and things, they're able to obviously do a lot more independently than the kids who are still figuring out how to spell everything that they're wanting to write down. So I guess that's kind of the difference there. But typically when I go to an author visit, I'm doing K through 5. And so I end up with all of them. Sometimes I'll do something different for the really young ones, like kindergarten and preschool. I will do an interactive Three Bears rap song with them where we're dancing, and I have movements to all the words to the song, and I'm able to have a little bit more fun with them in that way versus with the second through fifth grade. I'm able to talk more about what it's like to be a writer and the stories behind my stories, and they have the attention span and interest to want to hear all of that. And I think they're more developmentally ready to handle some of that information. So it varies. I would say the minority make a really, really good income. And I say minority because we're talking about like J.K. Rowling, we're talking about people who have New York Times best-selling titles, because the reality of a book that's traditionally published, so let's just say for easy figuring sake, a $10 book. So when I sell a $10 book, I make in royalties roughly 85 cents on a book. Okay. And that's not even counting what happens when Amazon reprices it and makes it for less. There are all kinds of things like that that happen. And so the reality is it's not something that you go into because you think it's a lucrative business. And I do whole day picture book workshops. And that's one of the first things I talk about are what are your goals as an author? And so I talk about all these different goals that you might have as being an author. And then when we talk about if your goal is to make a lot of money, you may want to reconsider the profession. And some author friends of mine, they have a husband that is able to support them if they don't make enough. But I also have author friends that they do a lot more there's a whole other side of publishing that's called work for hire. And I've done a couple of those projects. And it's something where instead of you writing a story and then sending it to a publisher and saying, would you like to make this into a story? I think it's a great idea, blah, blah, blah. You are presenting them with your idea and your story and asking, would they like to take it? Versus work for hire is when a company is asking you, hey, I've got this series. So for instance, a biography series, would you write one of the books in the series? Would you write the Benjamin Franklin one? There was a whole holiday series. Would you write the Valentine's Day one? So there are things like that that happen where you're being presented with the project and the topic, and there might be guidelines to follow that make it cohesive with the rest of the series. So the pressure isn't on having to be as creative or having to tell them why they want this book, because they're telling you what book they want. And they're asking, do you have the ability to produce this book in the quality that we need? And so some friends of mine that do only work for hire are able to make a living on those work for hire projects because they keep doing them over and over again. Now, I've only done a couple of them because a lot of what I enjoy is coming up with the story in the first place. And usually it's, there is a story behind every one of my stories, and I like to be able to share those. And that's part of the joy of bringing a book into the world, is it's sometimes bringing a piece of you into the world, and being able to share that is really special. But, as far as for me, the reason I waited so long to start publishing, and the reason I waited so long to stop teaching to then do this full time, is in reality the financial reasons. As I said, I was scared to jump off and start taking classes and paying for conferences and buying the laptop and all of those things because of the cost, because it is an investment to start out, to get to learn all of it. But then there's also the reality of losing my teaching income and my benefits. That's huge when I have daughters, one that just got out of college and another one going in soon. It's kind of scary. And so I made sure, it's not something that you jump into lightly. Like, I made sure our house was paid off, our vehicles were paid off, and my husband is the police chief of our town, and so he has a stable job. And making sure, I took a sabbatical leave to kind of test drive what it would be like to be an author for a year. So last year wasn't the best year to take a sabbatical, I will add, because who knew the global pandemic was going to happen, and a lot of the income I was going to have was going to be through the speaking. But when you are comfortable and you feel like it is something that you could, if you're ambitious enough to keep seeking those publishing opportunities, then you can make an income. Now, most authors that make a decent income as an author also do speaking. And I've had many tell me when I was first starting out that your bread and butter is actually the speaking, like doing the author visits, which thankfully that's what I love the best. I mean, like, I love bringing a book out in the world, but I absolutely love getting to share it in a big way with a gym full of kids and get to, inspire them about the power of writing. And, through the things that I write about, I'm able to share those things. Like, when I talk about my growth mindset books, I'm able to talk about growth mindset with these kids. So the speaking part is probably what I would say I make the most income off of versus just producing the books in the first place. Couple of things. So one that is a frustrating thing is that people think that since you're at home, that you're just available all day long and that you can do all of these now volunteer things. And so you have to be very careful to protect your work time, because you are still working, even though it looks different. So there's that. And, I can't tell you how many times I've been, on a live Zoom class that I'm teaching or doing something like this, an interview or whatever, that people think they can just drop by and that I can just go to the door. And that's not the reality. Like, pretend I'm in an office building. You wouldn't just come into my office when I'm with a client and working with someone. So there's that. A couple of other things, and these are just more stigma things or things that people just think they know, is, someone reads a book like Brown Bear, what do you see? I see a red bird looking at me. And they're like, that is so pathetically easy. Like, anyone can do that. And because picture books are generally 500 words or less, it seems like it would be easy. But let me tell you that it is not. It is so tricky to figure out, how are you going to craft an entire story or teach an entire concept in 500 words or less, and also be in sync with the illustrations that need to happen in that book. Even, if you're not the illustrator, it makes it even harder, because you're trying to a little bit visualize, what they might put into your book as pictures, and you also don't want to step on their toes. So that's kind of a dance that you have to do and be careful with. But it's really difficult. I can tell you when we do our critique groups, the seven of us, when we're trading stories, and, you know, you listen to each other's stories, and I might bring a story in thinking, what, I think this one's just about submission ready, and then you start hearing the different things that are not quite working or not coming clear the way that you thought they were, and it's like, oh yeah, you're right, this is terrible. And so it's very tricky to read. There are a lot of people that I know that write novels or middle grade, and they said, I would much rather tackle a novel or a middle grade than try to do a picture book because they're so hard. And so I guess that's one thing that's a little frustrating when people see that you write a picture book and they think, oh, well, isn't that nice? How long did that take you? An hour? And it's like, no, like 3 years. And so a lot of people just don't understand that. And the other thing, this one isn't really frustrating, it's just kind of funny actually, is, and you already talked about money, but when I go to author visits, kids see authors like as these rock stars sometimes, and they think that you're a millionaire. It's so funny because I will have, out of the mouths of babes, they'll raise their hand, and you'll call on them and they'll say, are you rich, or are you a millionaire, or those kinds of questions, which is just funny. I usually do just laugh and say, no, not even close. But so I guess those are some of the misconceptions that a lot of people don't quite understand. I think my favorite thing is kind of like with teaching is just like when you see someone light up with excitement, whether it's because they're enjoying the story or because they now get something that they didn't get before, or they feel inspired, or, those little, I guess, light bulb moments or aha moments where kids just connect. Two things. So one, I would say, is the focus on sales. So when you write your story, you're pouring your passion and your, everything on the page. And unfortunately, like, there is a huge focus on sales. So like getting people to write reviews for you and getting people to buy the book. And it feels icky to ask people that, like, buy my book, or will you please, I'll give you the book if you'll just tell me, if you like it. And if you do like it, will you tell Amazon that and write a review on there? Because the sales make a difference on if that publisher is going to take you on again for another book project. Because if they don't earn back their advance that they paid you, or the royalties are really low, I mean, they're taking a big risk by paying for your book. So there are some people who do self-publishing, and they realize very quickly how expensive it is to put a book together. Like if you're hiring your own illustrator, it's thousands of dollars, and the printing of the book. And if you want it to come out in hardcover, if you want a dust jacket on it, if, paying for the layout, for the copy editing, the regular editing, all of those things, it's really expensive. So when someone's taking on your story, they're taking a big financial risk on you and saying, okay, we're going to pay all of these thousands of dollars to produce your book. But then you have that pressure of having some results, and not the result of, yay, I have a book in the world, because that's great, but that's not what they're after. It's a business. And so they want to get a return on their investment. And so what that means is trying to create sales for your book. So sometimes at author visits, you're able to promote your books in ways that, the kids are excited anyway. And so you can have book signings, and you can bring your books with and they can purchase them. Or when you're speaking at conferences, I will often make sure that I mention, some of my books and how they can be used as mentor text. So hopefully a teacher will want to use that in their classroom with the lesson idea I give them. So those kinds of things. But it just feels icky always having to ask people, or to, you don't want to be a salesperson. That's why I'm not in sales, because I don't want to be a salesperson. And so that part is hard. And I would say the other part that I don't enjoy is all of the rejection, because, well, even Dr. Seuss, I think, what was it, 27 times he was rejected for his first book. So it happens to all of us. J.K. Rowling was rejected a dozen times before Harry Potter was finally picked up, which I'm sure those dozen people are kicking themselves. But, there is a lot of rejection, and that is hard. It's hard when you're waiting for a really long time for an answer, because it can take months for an editor or an agent to get back to you to tell you yes or no. And then when it is a no, after you've waited all that time, it can be a little heartbreaking and hurt your feelings a little bit. But, hopefully they'll give you a little bit of feedback with that rejection. We call those champagne rejections, when you have a really good one where it just wasn't a fit for them, or they already have something like that, or whatever, that might be. And they maybe give you a little bit of feedback, because then you can use that to improve it before you submit it again somewhere else. Well, there have been several times that I've been I let the excitement take over and maybe should have waited a little bit. So, for example, I've had a couple of times where, I've learned that if something is too good to be true, it probably really is, if you think that it might be. So I've been scammed a couple of times. And so things like that can happen. So I guess I wish I knew better going in, like some of the things that can happen that can be a trick, or that can be, actually not a legit publisher or not a legit whatever. So learning about those kinds of things, and that's part of what I teach in growth mindset. Learn from your own mistakes, but also learn from the mistakes of others. So anytime that you can get someone to share some of the pitfalls that have happened for them, it's nice to know those going in, so that you don't have to fall in them and make those mistakes yourself and sometimes get hurt in the process. So I guess that, and just really making sure that, again, with the excitement taking over, that you make sure it really is ready before you send it off. Because something that I did not realize is the publishing world is a lot smaller than you think. So you may think, oh my goodness, there's Scholastic and Simon and Schuster and Macmillan and all these different publishers, so many of them. But really, a lot of these editors and agents talk to each other, and they get to know different people when they maybe have a certain story that they're sending out to every single person, and it's a form letter, and those kinds of things. They really do talk to each other, and they get to know people. So if you ever do something that's maybe not with integrity or whatever, it's going to be found out. And so just like in life, you want to make sure that you're always doing the next right thing, and not popping off or going on social media and talking badly about an editor, or I can't believe they didn't take my story because whatever. I'm you wouldn't think people would do that, but some people do. And then what do you think other editors are going to think when they see someone bad mouthing an editor? They're going to think, oh, well, I'm not going to want to work with that person, because if I do something they don't like, they're going to talk about me. So you want to just make sure that you're being careful. And so I guess just knowing that the publishing world is small. And so when you think, oh, I'll just go ahead and send this story out to 20 different people and see what happens, even though it's not really ready yet, you make sure it's ready before you send it, because, they have everything computerized. They know, when they log a new submission, they're able to pull up your past submissions. They're able to see, like what has been sent before. And so if you're creating a track record that isn't a good one, then that's not going to help your cause. So make sure you're always ready. Your submissions have been critiqued either professionally by someone or with your critique group, and make sure it really truly is your best work before you're sending it out, so that your rejections are more because of it wasn't a fit or the timing wasn't right, not because it just wasn't good. So taking your time to do that pays off in the long run. My life is a lot more balanced now that I'm not also trying to teach full time. I've always been one of those multitaskers. Like every time I finish one thing, like I'm starting another. Like I was doing my master's degree while I was teaching full time. And then I started writing and teaching full time. And so I've always done that. But it's been nice this past year while I was on sabbatical, and now the start of the school year, to just be able to focus on the writing and being a mom. There are so many things I could share about. It's so nice helping my daughter with her first classroom. I'm going there again tomorrow to help her set up, and helping, my daughter who's a senior, getting to have that life balance of, I got to go with her to get her senior pictures. I got to help her paint her senior year parking spot, those kinds of things that, if I were still teaching right now, I would be in my own classroom, like getting everything ready, and I wouldn't be able to be writing stories or helping my kids like I would like to. So it was something that I needed to do for me, knowing that I wanted to do more of the writing and more of the speaking, and I couldn't do that along with teaching full time. So um, you can balance it how you want to balance it. I mean, your to-do list is going to look different than someone else's to-do list. And so I just make sure, like I said, that I have my need to-dos, and then I can be guilt-free about all of the want to-dos later if I can tackle those, 3 or 4 big things that I know either someone's depending on me, or there's something that is on a deadline, or something that I just know would be helpful or help out my career in some way, those kinds of things. If I do those, then I can guilt-free do these other things. So it's definitely a learning process, and you adjust it as you go, and it's different every day and every week. But yeah, I think you can achieve balance. It's just the balancing act is different all the time. I would say kind of like what I did was I was able to find a grant, and there are grants and scholarships available. Like I've gone to the Highlights Foundation, in the Poconos Mountains. You can go to Highlights, the Highlights magazine. They have a whole barn where they offer classes, and you get to stay in your own cabin for the days of the classes, and it's amazing. They offer scholarships, or other workshops and conferences I've been to, you can apply to volunteer and get some money off, or things like that, where you can take not necessarily as much of a financial risk to try things out and to learn about it. Because how will you know if you like it if you don't really know how to do it? And so I recommend learning what you need to learn to do it. Like, what would it be like? And then, like I said, I'm not a huge risk taker. And so I took a sabbatical leave knowing that my job was still waiting for me if I decided I was going to come back to teaching. And, there's nothing that says I can't still go back to teaching. I mean, I technically resigned, but, if down the road I want to teach again, I can apply and teach again somewhere. So I would say testing the waters. The last 10 years I was writing while I was teaching. So of course it wasn't at the level that I am now because I didn't have the time. But when I had a chance, it was more of a hobby level, I guess. So trying something out as at a hobby level, and, learning things when you can, and going to events when you can. And, even if you only put out a book every year or two, it gives you a little taste of what it's going to be like. And then if you decide that you like that, then maybe you want to take a bigger risk and, try to go all in. But that's a personal decision that I think everyone has to make. But I definitely wouldn't just jump into it thinking, oh, it would be cool to do this, I'll just go ahead and quit my job and do this. I would definitely learn about it first and try dabbling in it for a while first. And then, you can decide if it's something that you think you would like to do full time. Now, this is specifically to writing, but it can very easily be transferred to anything that you want to do. But I always tell them my top 4 tips to becoming a better writer is, number 1, to read a lot of books. Because if I want to write, then by reading other books, I'm seeing good examples of writing. And so I'm seeing how other authors play with words, how other authors do their beginning hook, how other authors, tie things up in the ending, those types of things. So in reading, I'm seeing good examples. And so what that is basically is research, right? And so if you want to be something else, a professional musician or a landscaper or whatever it is, then you need to do the research that is required to figure out, how to become good at that thing. And then number 2 is, of course, you need to practice the thing that you want to do. So if you want to become a better piano player, then you really need to be practicing piano. And if I want to become a better writer, I need to be writing. And so in doing that, I figure out things that I can improve. I figure out things that are doing well. All of those practice exercises that you can do, they all help you and strengthen your skills in writing. And then tip number 3 is to learn from others. So whether that is a coach, whether it's a mentor, whether it's, if you want to learn guitar, you probably want to find someone who can play guitar, who can teach you. Or like my daughter wanted to learn ukulele. We didn't know anyone giving ukulele lessons. So I got her a ukulele for her birthday, and she started finding YouTube videos on how to tune it, and then how to play this particular chord and how to play another chord. And video by video, she eventually learned enough chords to play a simple song. And now she can play just about anything you put in front of her. But she was learning from others, but she was doing that in a way that she took the initiative. Okay, who knows how to do this? How can I learn it? And today in the digital age, you can do that so easily with so many different skills that you want to learn through YouTube videos or Googling something, whatever. So learning from others is another big one. And then my last one, number 4, is always never give up, because, I often tell the story of my very first publication was an article I wrote for Highlights Children's Magazine. And I originally sent it to a different magazine who rejected it. And I could have very easily given up then and said, who am I to think that I could get something published professionally? I could have made a paper airplane out of it and flown it into the garbage. But then I sent it to Highlights and I asked them if they would be interested. It's a lot more complicated than just asking if they would be interested, but they politely declined, saying that their how-to articles in their magazine are only 1 page and mine was too long. It was 2 pages long. And so I thought, okay, well, I can fix that. So I took out anything that didn't absolutely need to be there. I tightened it up and got it down to 1 page, and I resubmitted. And lo and behold, they ended up saying yes. And it was because I didn't give up. Another magazine said, no, that's not for us. And then this magazine also said no, but they gave me some feedback, and I was able to use that feedback to improve it and to get it to where it needed to be. And then, it wasn't even as simple as, okay, then they said yes. And then in the next month it appeared in their magazine. It was for a 1-page article. I had no idea how much work it would be, because they had me interview veterinarians, because the article was how to teach your dog to jump through a hoop. Because my daughter and I had taught our dog, Lucy, this little dog we used to have, to jump through a hula hoop. And so I had to contact veterinarians to make sure that the amount of reward treats that I was advising was okay, so that they don't have people calling their magazine saying our dog is sick now because you told us to give this many treats. I had to contact canine trainers, animal behaviorists, like even some that were famous. They said that I really needed to get their blessing on it, that it would be something that if kids read the article the way I wrote it, that they could be successful. And so I had no idea that they vetted so carefully before publishing something. And so that gave me the experience of working with editors and doing research, even if it was just for a 1-page article. But I didn't give up. And that's the thing. Like, it would have been easy many times during that year-long process to get 1-page article published. Would have been really easy to give up. But as I tell students when I talk about this story, is if I had given up on that one, do you think I would have gone on to write a book if it was that hard to write a little magazine article? And so it's important to take even the little things seriously and keep trying and keep going. And then eventually you can up your game and increase in what you're doing. So those are my big tips.